Trauma does not have to live in our memories alone. Or let me rephrase this. Trauma doesn't live in our memories alone. It can live in our nervous system. It could also affect our health. It stores that emotion stores into our body and just gets bottled up, and then it keeps growing and growing and growing to the next thing you have a dis-ease, which is dysfunction. It's a dysfunction in our body. We don't see it, we don't know it because it's a part of our life. It's like that song, Hello, Darkness, my old friend. It's like you get used to the drama, the trauma, the living in fight or flight. So today we're going to look at what can we do to transfer some of these emotions and work with them in a way that will support us. For example, with neurofeedback. Neurofeedback is something I've been talking to you now for over a year. I have probably going on 2 years now. It is a process that's easy to do, as well as coaching. So there are two aspects that we're going to be talking about today, which is overcoming trauma with neurofeedback, but also if you choose to do neurofeedback, to consider doing coaching as well, because it'll help you kind of rewrite the story, not just rewire the brain. Well, today we have our brain whisperer, Dr. John Silva. I am so excited every time we have this conversation because it was life-changing for me in many ways. Now, I am not a person who, I'm very slow to anger. Let me just put it this way. And if you don't believe me, ask my husband. He will testify to this. I am slow to anger. But once I get there, look out. The Latin temper comes out. But most people don't understand that we can start rewiring, reformatting. And so when I saw me and how I felt with neurofeedback is when I created the I Am the Solution event, the I Am the Solution Natural Health Summit that I do every year. And that particular year I had started 3 months in or a month in, and boy, did I feel different. I felt different, but I wasn't doing anything different. I felt different. And as a result of that feeling, now the action was different. So today we're going to be talking about how to overcome trauma with neurofeedback. And I'm going to add their little tagline, and coaching. So get your paper, get your pens, because we're going to learn and grow together. And when you need a friend, you can count on me. I'll be right here waiting for you. Hi, my name is Lily McDermott, and I'm a certified life coach. I am a certified holistic cancer coach and the host of the Lillian McDermott radio show Classroom. If this is the first time in the classroom, please know I've been waiting for you. This is a safe place where you can go when you need a friend. It is my commitment to provide natural ways to heal, and it is my mission to make awareness, responsibility, and truth a part of our everyday life so that you, my listening and viewing friend, will feel empowered to embrace a new truth and live the life of your dreams. Well, yes, you heard me correctly, that we can address trauma in so many different ways. There's different ways. And Dr. Silva has talked about different ways that you can rewire the brain or you can help your brain. And so today we're going to be talking about how do we address trauma with neurofeedback. And since it is our sole purpose in life to give and receive love and knowledge, I am grateful that Dr. John Silva is here to do just that. Welcome back to the classroom.
It's wonderful to be back again. Looking forward to this topic.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, can you imagine? It's already April. It's already April, and we're just now getting started with people realizing, you know what? This new year didn't change anything because I haven't changed. So let's talk about today. We're going to talk about neurofeedback. We have so many classes on neurofeedback. So I want to encourage all of you to go to the YouTube playlist with Dr. John Silva on neurofeedback and the brain and check out some of those conversations. So I'm sure you'll find a topic there for you. So instead of going over what neurofeedback is, let's talk about how trauma can affect the way we think.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful place to start.
We'll
Actually,
start
we'll
there.
start even before that. So it's interesting when I first got involved with doing brain-based work, when I thought trauma, what first thing that conjured up in my mind was physical trauma, trauma to the head. And that is a form of trauma, of course. It took me a while for me to understand that a lot of
Yeah.
people coming to see me with brain-based disorders is the general term I like to use. So the anxiety, the depression that can follow the other type of trauma, which is the topic for today, the emotional trauma. It was a little bit of a process for me to unwire from that. And again, here's the fascinating thing is we all throughout a course of a lifetime have what I call the biocumulative effect of both of those traumas for the most part. I mean, think about it. And again, this is the topic isn't about the physical trauma, but we do need to address it. And I'm going to share with everybody today how by looking at how our brains function, both types of trauma leave a certain neurological pattern in brainwave activity, which is quite fascinating. So coming back to physical trauma, this can be actual significant hits to the head, what we call concussive events or concussive injury, or even what we call a subconcussive event or injury. These are those smaller hits to the head that maybe leave you a little dazed, a little blurry-eyed, have to rest for a few minutes, don't necessarily land you in the hospital or ER. But nonetheless, they both have a physical impact on how our brains function. And you keep adding more of those over the course of a lifetime. So think back to your childhood. Okay, you're learning how to walk. How many times you don't recall that unless your parents have told you these stories, but you're learning how to stand up, take those first few steps holding onto furniture, you fall, maybe hit your head, and then you actually start to walk and you're falling and tripping, and then you start to go play out in the playground with your friends, and all these little, what we call micro traumas add up. And then, of course, take the more significant events. Okay, so car accidents where you may have hit, say, the windshield in the vehicle, or sports injury. All these things have an impact on how our brains function, and they have this cumulative effect, what I call biocumulative effect. So now we come over to emotional trauma, and I want people to kind of relate it similar to those physical traumas. No, it wasn't a hit to your head, but the impact to your brain's function or physiology is almost one and the same. Okay. So again, these are cumulative. You go back to when you're a child. Okay. What kind of stresses, what kind of environment, what kind of family dynamics, all those things, especially when our brains are still very, very pliable or plastic in nature and they're still developing. And again, you may not have memory of some of these things, but there could have been these small micro traumas. Maybe witnessing your parents having an argument. Maybe your parents going through a divorce, as so many of our parents, especially in the baby boomer generation, witnessed at such a young age. Again, you may not have much memory of those arguments, those fights, or the divorce process itself. Maybe you do, but nonetheless, it all interferes with how our brain is developing, especially at those young ages. But it's also creating these little physiological, call them scars in the brain, okay, that are detectable. So then you move into adult life and we start experiencing more trauma, okay? So you start a career, maybe you have the stress, day-to-day stress of your career, your job, financial stress, and then you start to have a family. For those that have family, of course, you have family dynamics, children, all those things are the traumas that we practically all experience on a daily basis. And of course, we have the more major or significant traumatic events like loss of a loved one, significant injuries to ourselves or loved ones, or witness to something. And this would apply to people like first responders. They witness traumatic events or the aftermath of a traumatic event. These all leave impressions, physiological impressions on our brain that can start to cause our brain to short circuit is the way I like to put it. Okay. No fault of your own. It's just the bioaccumulation of these traumas. And then take someone who's had perhaps both forms throughout a lifetime. And now we've got a brain that's really, really having a tough time just keeping up with the daily functions that our brain is supposed to process.
Yeah.
And I'll take it down to the very basics. Our brain, along with our heart, is the biggest demands for energy from our body. I see people who have had, again, history, sometimes a lifelong history of both physical and emotional trauma. But even those that just have mostly emotional trauma or those significant traumatic events, we're talking 30s, 40s, still young, in my opinion, and they barely have enough energy to get out of bed.
Yeah.
And here's where the depressive traits set in. So it's not them, it's not depression, it's a medical diagnosis because their brain doesn't have enough energy just to get through their day and to conjure up their thoughts and be able to have conversations, and they're exhausted by 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And they start to fall into this depression, which is then associated with, oh, you've got PTSD because of your trauma. It just becomes this vicious cycle. So again, energy is that one thing. And then, of course, then they have probably slept most of the day or they've been just inside their own mind
Yeah.
ruminating constantly. And that
Yeah.
requires a lot of energy in of itself.
Yes.
And next thing you know, now it's nighttime, it's time to go to sleep. I've been ruminating all day. I'm thinking about all the worst possible things that can happen in my future, my next day. Now I can't get to sleep. And now
Yeah.
my sleep is disrupted. And think about this. That just happens for these poor people. And I've worked with so many. And those of you that are listening, perhaps maybe yourself or someone who you know that might want to tune into this in the future, a recording of it. But this is so real for so many people of all different ages. And it
And
comes back to that trauma, again, physical and or emotional. Today's topic is out on emotional. I'm going to share one more thing. So
mhm.
taking this back to brain function, there's an interesting thing that we can pick up on with EEG, electroencephalogram. We've talked about this many times. So this is basically a diagnostic for the brain, looking specifically at brain function. And we look at brain function as it relates to what we call our brain waves. And we have four primary brain waves that we measure in EEG technology. We have delta brain waves, theta brain waves, alpha, beta, and there's also gamma. And each one of these brain waves have a role in our cognitive abilities, our emotional well-being, our behavioral well-being. Okay. And if there's too much or too little of these brain waves in certain regions of our brain, one, it can help us to really give us a lot of insight as to why a person might be suffering with the depression or the anxiety or whatever the other symptoms are as a result of the emotional trauma or again, the diagnosed PTSD, or now a more common diagnosis is CPTSD, complex PTSD. Just means you've had more of that emotional trauma and traumatic events that have bioaccumulated to a point where you're really struggling. But what the interesting thing is, with QEEG technology, delta brainwaves specifically, we are able to see distinct patterns on what we call brain maps. So envision, if you could, for those of you listening, a weather map that you see on your news, your nightly news. And you know, when they're referencing high pressures, low pressure systems, or high temperatures, low temperatures, they'll typically use warm colors to indicate high, and then cool colors like blues to indicate low. So what we often see, and this is almost predictable now when I do a QEEG on somebody, is we will see significant portions of a person's brain light up this bright red and yellow, which indicates their delta brainwave activity is running too high, excessively high. That is driving a lot of their cognitive, emotional, behavioral well-being, but it also gives me a lot of insight to say, all right, how much of this could have been related to their trauma, both physical and or emotional. So I just wanted to share that with you. So this technology has been around for many, many years. Unfortunately, it's not part of typical allopathic mainstream medicine or psychiatry. It should be, because it's an easy diagnostic that we can get the sense of why a person's brain and how much it's been affected by trauma.
No, I'm glad that you went back and you made the distinction between physical trauma and emotional trauma. Because here's what I know. When I see somebody get hit, or like for me, that car accident, that was a
Mhm.
one-time thing, that the effects of it lasted a while because you feel the pain. When somebody is traumatized emotionally, regardless of what it is, it could even be perception, something they
Mhm.
saw, and how that is interpreted in the brain and how it manifests later on is how we view the world after that, right? And so what happens is subconsciously, we don't even know that it is ruminating in our body. It's going there. It's a part of what our selection process is how we view the world. It's through those lenses because we have all these thoughts that are in our subconscious mind, and 90% of them are repetitive. They're repetitive. So if we're consciously bringing them up and we're aware before we go to sleep at night, man, I really don't have a good relationship with this person, or this person hurt me, or because of this action that I did, now this happened, like someone who's drinking and driving causes another person to die or be injured. You live with that, all these emotions. It doesn't just happen one time. It happens every day we recall it. So there is the physical trauma, which you understand, we could all understand, right?
Yeah.
But the emotional trauma that we don't see how many times we get hit by the thought is even more important too, because it's like the silent brain traumatizer, the silent
Yeah.
brain damager,
Yeah.
because nobody wants to. I'm so grateful that you said I could get the physical. I understood the physical, but the emotional took me a long time. And I'm hoping that today's class will help somebody go from emotional trauma. What emotional trauma? And I'm telling you, you know how many times I've spoken to someone that, when I do my intake, tell me about your life, tell me about your relationship with your father, your mother, your siblings, who do you have alive, and go through all this stuff. Life was perfect. I had a perfect childhood. And all of a sudden we start digging deeper. Oh, yes, my father molested me when I was a kid. What? I'm just hearing about this now. This should have been, let me lead with this, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it becomes part of our life story that we tell ourselves that, what can you do about it? Well, there's a lot we can do. And that's why we're doing this today, right?
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
The combination of coaching, and I'm a big advocate for, especially for people who come to see me, where we're working on their brain's function, improving their function so they can have that energy to think more clearly, think beyond and again, what's happened in the past has happened in the past. But if you have a better functioning brain, more
Yeah.
energy efficient brain, it makes it so much easier to process this, deal with it, and oftentimes once and for all. And that's the power of
Yeah.
neurofeedback. And we'll talk a little bit more about specific types or methodology of neurofeedback specific to emotional trauma. It's very,
Okay.
very powerful.
Let's get started.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, oftentimes I will refer out to coaching or psychiatry or counseling, especially when people may be going through what I call the integration period of their trauma-based neurofeedback. So, yeah, let's touch on that. So, I know we've discussed neurofeedback many times, but for those of you that may be tuning in for the first time, so neurofeedback is a technology that has been around since the 1970s. It uses the same QEEG technology that we use to look at brain function, measure brain function in terms of our brain waves, our delta waves, our theta, alpha, beta, so on. But what we do now is we use that QEEG technology to provide what we call biofeedback for the brain to get the brain to self-correct these irregular brainwave patterns. It's completely non-invasive, it's non-coercive, doesn't change your personality, doesn't change your child's personality, who you or they have become. It just makes a better version of you. I like to look at it, and I think we've talked about the software upgrades in the past. It's going to take you from a version 1.0 to a 2.0, then a 3.0 in terms of energy efficiency, better cognitive function, better emotional and behavioral well-being. And who can't have a better version of themselves? I mean, that's part of our life's journey, is always striving to be better at whatever we decide to be better at, and then get to a point where we can share that with others. I think is a passion of mine, and getting people to go beyond just themselves and share this, whether it's knowledge or helping someone physically or helping someone financially, whatever the case might be, is sharing whatever tools, whatever resources, whatever skills you have once you've discovered this journey. And it's an ever evolving journey, which is amazing. So coming back to the neurofeedback, so a typical neurofeedback session, you have sensors on your scalp. And these are just sensors that are detecting brain waves in real time. That information is conveyed to specialized hardware, and then a software program that will analyze that data in real time. So basically, a computer is reading your brain waves, and then it gives your brain a feedback to, for instance, I was mentioning how our delta brain waves can be elevated when we look at them for someone that has significant emotional trauma. So what we're going to do is establish a neurofeedback training protocol, because I like to look at this as a weekly training. You're doing this a couple times a week, just like going to the gym. And what we're doing is we're training your brain through biofeedback to bring that elevated delta brain waves down to a more optimized normal level. It takes some time. So I typically have clients doing about 3 of these neurofeedback sessions a week. Nowadays, it's done from the convenience of home with technology that I provide them. And the feedback mechanism is so easy. So again, you have sensors on your scalp and you're watching a video. And you choose what you want to watch, whether it's a movie on Netflix, a YouTube channel that you follow. That part doesn't matter, just something that's going to keep you attentive. And as you watch the video fades in and out. It's that in and out that your brain subconsciously is paying attention to and getting itself to self-regulate to get the screen to go bright. It uses a process called operant conditioning. But the long and short of it is it's non-invasive, it's simple, it's non-pharmaceutical, and the beauty about it is getting to the most direct root cause of what trauma has done to our brains or anyone's brain throughout their lifetime.
So when it comes to being able to go directly, there is another, it's been around for a long time. It's called EMDR, which a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people that have had trauma have been using EMDR. How does neurofeedback compare to EMDR? Is that something you can address?
From the little bit I do know about EMDR, and I've had several clients who have gone through EMDR, I think it's wonderful. Again, anything that is non-invasive, preferably non-pharmaceutical, a non-biochemical approach, I think is wonderful. And I've seen people do well with it. From what I understand about EMDR, specific type, and correct me if I'm wrong, eye exercises as you're
It's
going through
following
some
the
type
light.
of
Yeah.
coaching.
Hmm.
Yes.
Hmm.
What that you're doing is you're gaining a window into the nervous system, and through those eye movements. And again, I won't go deep into the neurology. There's a lot of complex neurology, but yeah, it is using, and vision is the biggest part of our brain's resources, is processing vision on a daily basis. So it has a neurological, downstream neurological effect, is how I'll put it. And it can work very well. The difference here is we're working with the brain and as real time as you could possibly get. These sensors are detecting exactly what the brain is doing at
Hmm.
moment to moment, giving the brain corresponding output through the video fading in and out. So in my opinion, even more direct than EMDR. Then this, again, there's many other interventions and therapies out there within the natural realm, the non-pharmaceutical, non-traditional realm that can affect brain function. But as far as I know that exists, because of those sensors and that biofeedback mechanism, probably the most direct impact. Now, oftentimes we combine the two. I've had clients that have done EMDR at the same time they're doing the neurofeedback, and sometimes, especially for people who have significant effect of PTSD, CPTSD, and trauma, it sometimes takes that combination effect to really help them through this in the shortest time possible.
Okay. Okay, so
Yeah.
my follow-up question to that is, I remember when you sat me down after I did my QEEG and you showed me the red areas, the yellow areas,
Mm-hmm.
the blue and the gray areas. So with that in mind, when you look at a brain, and are there any like si symbols or signals that someone has had trauma that is emotional trauma? Let's say they have suppressed the emotional trauma and they're not saying that they've had emotional trauma. Are there, is there a typical pattern of too much delta, not enough gamma?
Yeah.
That you can look at it and not need the interpretation and say, this is not physical trauma, this is emotional trauma. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm asking the
Yes,
question
no,
right.
it does. It does. And going back to those delta brain waves is a telltale
Yeah,
sign. It's
yeah.
interesting because I've gotten to the point of doing so many QEEGs and the interpretation of those QEEGs. if I had someone just sit the person down and I put a cap and never had a conversation with that person, analyze their data, I can almost get a good working history without even having that conversation, just based on the
Ah,
clues that their brain has given me through QEEG. It's not
interesting.
always 100% for certain, but
No.
there are certain traits. And again, coming back to and help people visualize this, these are the times where we wish I had some type of PowerPoint, but just imagine a map of your head, and we have the different regions of our brain that we've come to name, like the frontal cortex, the temporal lobes. We map out each region and we use colors to represent where that particular brain wave is either too high or too low. So a
Yeah.
typical pattern we see from emotional trauma, again, PTSD, is we'll see regions, sometimes several regions, or what I call globally, meaning the whole brain map is lit up this red and yellow. I've come to coin it the brain on fire condition, because if at first glance it looks like a brain map that's on fire, red and yellow colors. And that's just my terminology for it. But that brain on fire, it can be indicative of trauma, a bioaccumulation, again, of trauma and traumatic events over a course of a lifetime. And coming back to that, again, just take, even for those of us that maybe never had any significant events, or we managed to process it. We went through the grieving process, for instance, in a relatively short period of time. We dealt with it, or perhaps we compensated or suppressed. The fact is that daily we are dealing with daily stressors. It's what keeps us alive. It's what keeps our body being able to adapt and change. That's a good thing. Those are good stressors. But when they start piling up and they become, and especially when you get your thought process behind those stressors and you start ruminating on them, that's where it becomes too much and it's a bad thing for us. And this is, again, what we can pick up with QEEG technology. But the fact is, I mean, probably anyone walking on the planet these days, at least in modern society, especially here recently with all the geopolitical stuff, you can't escape some of the news and social media, emails. I mean, or if you watch mainstream media, we're all being bombarded, and this is becoming what I'm considering to be a global case of PTSD for all of us. If you're processing any degree or level of what's going on right now these past several years, especially more recent.
Yeah. And the division, Dr. John,
Yeah.
the
Mm-hmm.
division between somebody taking a perspective and the other person, it's interesting because I just did a class on this, two classes. One of them is respectfully disagreeing with people, how to respectfully disagree. And the second one was how to deal with difficult people. And those, because I'm getting bombarded and I'm also being bombarded myself. When I can't imagine why somebody would have a difference of opinion than me or you, because we're very much like-minded. But there are people who see the same thing totally different. They
Yeah.
see it as good, where we might see it as not so good. And then that's when the clash happens. And to me, I don't have a problem with somebody else's perspective, but there are people who have a problem and they start attacking you on Facebook or they start, shaming you. It's like a modern day lynching. It's a modern
Yeah.
day lynching. I mean, I've been called I literally been called a bigot, a bigot, privileged. I've been called a racist. I'm not. Can you imagine calling me a racist? I can't even. It doesn't even register in my brain to be calling me, all because I chose to watch the PTUSA halftime show.
Goodness, hope for that.
That was
Wow.
it.
Yeah,
Because
and that's just yeah. So you
anyway.
bring up, I mean, something we could probably talk on for hours, and you maybe have had this conversation with other guests on your show. But the reality is, if you don't mind, let's take it to current times. I mean, here we are in April, and again, we can take so many different topics, but the one I think is really hitting home, and I'm seeing more of it with my own personal clients that I'm working with, and I've been working with for the past several months. You can't help not seeing an email coming through your email inbox, or going to any social media network and just looking at the posts that are coming up in your feed, or tuning into the mainstream media or the alternative news media, no matter where, about this whole Epstein and this, not just Epstein, it's
Well, the
everything behind
war,
that and
the
circles
war,
around that.
everything, the war,
It,
the Congress, the
yes,
government, there's so much. Yeah.
there's just so much, but that one in particular is really the criminal nature of these people, the vile, disgusting things as people are starting to learn that have been going on right around us that we weren't privy to. And this is an awakening process. Unfortunately, it's a horrible journey for all of us to go through, but even
Yeah, it
more
could be
horrible for the people who suffer it.
it can definitely
So
be it could definitely be very painful to be
yeah,
awakened. Yeah,
yeah,
by
it
some of
is.
these
So
truths.
I'm seeing more and more people being directly, even though they're not the ones that experience the trauma, that they might be reading about and conjuring up what that person may have gone through, or there was a child or an adult in these circles of what we're learning. But it's having a toll, and put it that way. And I'm seeing more and more of that. And I remember going through when I first started learning some of this stuff many years ago. I've gone through that process, and I was fortunate enough to have this wonderful tool of neurofeedback to help me through it. But I
Yeah,
remember reading some of the stuff that I was reading. And again, you always have to question the source and is this
that's
accurate?
right.
But now that I'm here, we are 5, 6, 7 years later that I first learned of these crimes, especially against children. I mean, I went through the grieving process, and these children
Hmm.
I don't personally know, but how can you do that to somebody, and how can you do it at such a scale
There
globally?
is.
And the people that are involved that are being implicated in this, people that we look up to in Hollywood or whatever. So I've gone through that process, and of course, you never stop going through it. And I'm trying to help give
Yeah,
back, and that's my
yeah,
personal journey. And I donate to organizations that help to rescue some of these children that are still survivors of this evilness. But
yeah.
yeah, so not to go too far into this, but the reality is, in these last several months, we are all, how should I say, I'm using the term global PTSD. We're all discovering things that we were not privy to before. We're being exposed to a number of different things. We're awakening to the horrors. And it's something that your brain has to process. And wouldn't it be
Yeah.
wonderful if you had a tool to help you through this, to navigate this, to get your brain more energy efficient?
Wouldn't it be
And
wonderful
to
if we had
share
a
with
tool?
others to be able to, because again, this is a thing we all need to help each other through this. So
Yes,
whatever I
it's
can do
true.
to give back to people, and where I really would like to take this, especially, and I've worked with, of course, victims of child abuse and child abuse survivors and things of that nature, but take this to organizations that's their main goal and focus, and maybe have
Yeah,
this as part of their healing process
yeah.
beyond the standard allopathic therapy. So I've got a few contacts and I'm working on that, but I think
That's
neurofeedback would
wonderful.
be a wonderful adjunct.
That's wonderful. And when you think about it, all these people that are drawn, I have stayed away from it. I understand that it's happening, that now that they're looking at it, and hopefully there will be people that will be brought to justice.
Mm-hmm.
But the people that are diving into, and it's like when Charlie Kirk was murdered, there were a lot of people that reached out to me after they saw the video. And it's like, you watched it? I didn't watch it. I hardly ever watch the news. I just, I listen to it maybe, and then that's it. I don't want to see these things because our brain doesn't recognize that it's not happening to us. It assumes it
Yeah.
is happening to us. And we're watching it over and over and over again, that is, one injury after another injury after another injury. And that's where that cumulative thing is happening with people because we're the when you have a physical trauma, it's a one and done type of thing. But when you have emotional drama, every time you think of it, every time you see it, every time you
Mm-hmm.
experience it through somebody else's eyes, that's a re-injury. That's a
Yeah.
re-injury. So people are being triggered just by what has happened to these children. And so it's wonderful that there's this tool that we have now, that we currently have now, that we've had for a long time. If you stumbled upon this video, it's because there's a reason. Perhaps maybe you yourself have to look deep inside and see where, if there is something that has caused trauma in your life. So I want to encourage all of you to go to whenyouneedafriend.com, and while you're there, please subscribe to the website. two-step process. Make sure you also opt in by checking the email that is being sent to you. So it might be sent to you in spam. So check that out too. So until you opt in, you won't be a official subscriber. But also subscribe to all my social media, my website, my social media and BitChute and all the YouTube, all these different places that you can subscribe, like, and follow me. There is my Shop Now bag where you can use some of these tools to help create the life that you want. And I'm just going to say that if, we need your help to continue this classroom, we need your help. So whether it's $1, $1,000 a month, a one-time donation, whatever the case may be, we need your help. So please contribute and donate to the classroom. The description, the link is below. So please donate to help out the classroom grow. Also, I want you to know that Dr. John Silva, if you're a listener or follower of the classroom, if you let him know, or if you reach out to me and say, I would like a 45-minute free consult with Dr. Silva, I can send you the link, the Calendly link, get you hooked up with Dr. Silva, or you can go directly to drjohnsilva.com, reach out to him directly, and start your process, but let him know that you heard about it so that you can get that extra time with him as his gift to us in the classroom. Dr. Silva, for people that need to reach out to you, they can call you direct at 772-494-2576, or they can just email you at info@drjohnsilva or drjohnsilva.com. For those of you who are listening on podcasts, I want you to know that there should be a description, and that description should have Dr. Silva's information, but you could also reach out to me. Like I said, I'm more than happy to point you to Dr. Silva for this information. So Dr. Silva, I really appreciate the fact that not only did you become a traditional chiropractor, but you went beyond and looked at functional medicine. You looked at the functional neurology and how trauma does affect our life. And there is a distinction between the physical and the emotional. And I'm so grateful that when people go to you and do to learn more about neurofeedback or other things that you do with them, that you have this understanding of the importance of emotion.
Yeah, yeah. And again, from my perspective, I'm not going to be a coach or a counselor. I'll go refer out for that. I'll do my best with my knowledge and
Hopefully
my
that would
training.
be me. That would be me.
Yeah. So,
Raise my
but
hand.
my objective is to help your brain in the processing and what the brain has undergone as far as the dysregulation of the brain waves. And again, an important part of the healing process and for long-term benefit. And that's the wonderful thing about this. We're not talking just a short time fix. I've seen people who have, again, had significant lifetime trauma. We're talking major trauma. I mean, some of the stuff that I've heard from people when they're giving me their case history is stuff that you would see in drama, even horror movies. The stuff that would make up a script for a good movie, unfortunately, not good for them, but it's that kind of stuff that I've heard. And it's amazing that we have the coping mechanisms, that we have the ability to continue our day. Now, granted, these people are suffering through their day, but nonetheless, that we have that capability to survive. But to see how these people, once you start getting their brain function, their brain physiology into a more normal, optimized state, how quickly they bounce back and how quickly they're able to transform their lives. So, and again, it's not me. I don't have any special powers. Just taking my technology, my use and knowledge of a neurofeedback technology that has existed since like I said, since the 1970s, and offering that to them, coaching them through the process, watching how their brain is doing, because making adjustments along the way, and to see people literally within the course of sometimes just a few weeks to a couple of months go from someone who has had this PTSD, CPTSD diagnosis decades to being on their way to a whole different person. Panic is gone, depression is gone, severe anxiety is gone, they're sleeping better at nights, they're able to socialize, they're able to even have a relationship. I mean, I've worked with people who have just become so self-isolated because they can't even they can't even communicate with others because their brains are just so inoperable. And then to see them to now start getting beyond their shell, start socializing, get outside of their home. I mean, so many people are homebound because of their anxiety or their fears or their panic. And to see that flourish and change. I had a gal a couple of years ago who lives not too far from where my office is in Florida. She could barely get to my office. It was only through the help of her boyfriend to get out there to do the QEEG brain map. And going back to last month's show, for those of you tuned in today, if you haven't listened to last month's, tune into it. But we talked about the new technologies that I'm working with now that give us that ability to do this QEEG brain mapping in the convenience of home. But up until most recently, you would have to either fly over to Florida, come to my office, drive here. Anyway, make a long story short, this poor girl barely could get to my office. We managed to get the QEEG done. I made it very clear to her and her boyfriend just how much trauma has affected her brain function. And she took this to heart. She's like, you know what? You told me 3 times a week. I'm going to do it daily. I have nothing else going on. I can't work in real estate anymore. I can't get out of my own home because of the fear, the anxiety, the sleeplessness. And within 1 month, 30 sessions later, she was able to step outside and start going outside, socializing. By 3 months, she not only went back to her career in real estate, but she also started a sideline business. So just amazing. And it just to see people flourish like that and regain their life that otherwise they thought was lost forever is so amazing. And I want to touch on that because I brought this up, but we never delved into it. So I mentioned specific methodology of neurofeedback.
Yeah.
So again, neurofeedback is these sensors that we put on the scalp. Well, I've done some postgraduate training, some advanced training in trauma-based neurofeedback. And we have a specific part of the head that we put the sensor on, which is right about here. For those of you that aren't able to see the podcast, just to the inside of the right eyebrow. Okay, I'm giving you more detail than you probably need to know, but it's quite fascinating. And the reason why we put the sensor there is because it's one of the most direct ways to be able to look at brain function in a deeper portion of our brain, particularly our temporal lobe. And even deeper than that, a portion of our temporal lobe called the amygdala. If you just do a Google search or AI search these days, it's an interesting part of our brain. It's a small little almond-shaped, what we call nuclei within the temporal lobe. But that one little almond-shaped, tiny little part of our brain is our brain's emotional processing hub. Okay? It's essential for fear, anxiety, aggression, and reward. It serves a purpose, but the reality is people's amygdalas are like overwhelmed, and this is where the fight-flight response starts to manifest. Okay, so it's the nervous system being hijacked, the brain being hijacked by all these emotional stressors. And again, we can go back just to the daily stuff that we're experiencing, never mind the big traumas. But that part of our brain is taxed beyond imaginable. And we do a specific type of neurofeedback to get that part of the brain in this more balanced, coherent, regulated state. And I've seen people just sometimes with a few sessions, neurofeedback sessions. Now, these sessions are done a little bit differently. Instead of watching a video, typically I have people listening to music while they keep their eyes closed. And we have a single sensor right there by the side of the right eyebrow. And we're basically helping to what I call heal the amygdala or integrate the trauma and the physiological effect of trauma on that specific part of the brain. Quite powerful. In fact, these techniques, from what I understand, this specific methodology of trauma-based neurofeedback was developed by a traditionally trained medical neurologist from Texas many decades ago, and it's gone on to providers like myself, those of us that have dove deep into the neurofeedback QEEG realm. But I have seen such powerful effects with that. And again, these are good effects. Again, there's no side effect from this. There's no residual but the long-term benefit, because we're getting to the root source, which is the brain, but we're going even deeper into that one specific part of the brain called the amygdala. So it's a fascinating topic. In fact, and I want to share with the audience any resources you can possibly have to learn more about this beyond this podcast. So a wonderful book that has actually brought a lot of clients to my practice is a book that was written back in 2014. I highly recommend for anybody, but especially those of you who are listening in or give as a gift to someone who you know has the PTSD, CPTSD diagnosis. It's called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. He's a Dutch-born American psychologist that resides in Boston. A wonderful book, understanding the neurophysiology of our body, our brain, as it relates to trauma. And he dedicates a whole chapter in the book to neurofeedback specifically as a methodology or intervention for trauma.
Wow.
That's how he's used it. He's used it in his career for many, many years.
You know, it's interesting. You talk about anxiety, depression, ADHD. You've also talked about PTSD, CPTSD,
Mhm.
all things that people get medication for, all of them. That within a short period of time by doing, neurofeedback, can they get off all their medication?
Yes. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Why don't we
Uh,
start with neurofeedback? Why don't we make neurofeedback something that we all do to get that going so that you don't have to take the medication? That's what I believe. We should do things as naturally as possible. So there's one that we have never discussed, and maybe we have discussed because we've been talking about this for a long time. What about OCD? Is that
mhm.
similar to PTSD? Is it similar to ADD, ADHD, all those things? Can a neurofeedback help?
It can. So along with PTSD, OCD is one of those. Um, Again, I just like to use the basic terminology of brain-based disorders that can be a bit more challenging. Still responds well to neurofeedback, but it may take a bit longer. We may have to add other interventions along with the neurofeedback. And also with any of these conditions, look at root cause too. So again, someone who comes to me with, we know they have, because they mentioned in their history, they've been diagnosed with PTSD. They have the trauma throughout their lifetime or the significant traumatic events. Um, we know that's happening, but oftentimes these are the same people that have been taking medications for a long time, and they have now the biochemical effect, the residual effect of the toxins from those medications, or maybe they have poor dietary habits and they are eating a lot of foods with food additives that become toxic in their body, or they've been exposed to mold toxins or heavy metals. So again, we come back to that physical trauma. Again, it can be biochemical too. So always, no matter who I'm working with, no matter what their medical diagnosis might be, no matter what I may find on the QEEG, but especially if I find certain QEEG brain map patterns that lead to, hey, we might be dealing with some toxins here. Let's look at that. Let's make that a discovery process if it hasn't already been done. So we may order some laboratory tests to look to see if there's any toxin exposure, just how much we're dealing with, what toxins. And then I'm also well versed in how to properly detox from a variety of different chemicals as well as molds. And that's a big part of the healing process for a lot of people. So now, again, do they have the emotional trauma, but they have the biochemical
Yeah.
insults as well.
One size does not fit all. We
Yeah.
have sometimes we have to go in a little deeper. So, we've talked about all these conditions. Now, let's just specifically, can children, how young can we do this with children? Because
Mhm.
children, one of my biggest regrets is giving one of my children, or approving, Adderall or Ritalin. And at the beginning, it was wonderful, but the more they grew, the more medication, the more side effects, the more,
Yeah.
and I felt that, because they were so young when they started it, that it kind of like rewired the brain in a different way than had I
Yeah.
just let him be, you know, the kid that he needed to be. So can we do how young can they be as children, and as far as adults as well?
Mhm.
Is there too late to do somebody that's an adult? And if there are any contraindications?
Great questions. Yeah. So generally speaking, 5 to 6 years old would be about the youngest, and it'll get a case by case too. Of course, if I have a unruly child who can't sit still, very impulsive, it's going to be tough to keep sensors on their scalp. So we may have to look at other brain-based interventions to start just general calming the brain to work up to getting them to be able to do neurofeedback. In fact, I'm working with he's not a child anymore, but he's since birth. He's had neurodevelopmental issues and diagnosed with Asperger's, autism, and he has the functioning of about a 3-4-year-old, even though he's 20 something years old. So we're taking it step by step. We tried the neurofeedback, can only get so far. We're going to get there, but we have to do some other things first. So just to give you an example, but generally speaking, 5 to 6 years old. And as far as any age limit on the upper end of the age scale, no, really not. I mean, if you've dealt with trauma at any point in your life, or you have a bioaccumulation of trauma throughout your lifetime, there's no better time to start than right now. But age, yeah, it may be a little bit harder to, not harder, but it may be a little bit slower. Your brain might be a little bit slower to heal and recover. But I've worked with people well into their 70s and 80s with lifelong depression, anxiety, fear, panic, sleeplessness, and what they can do in a matter of just months that otherwise medications couldn't touch, or counseling. And I'm not knocking the other things. There's a time and place for them. But when you apply the power of neurofeedback and getting right to the power of the brain's ability to heal with these tools, it's amazing how much it can change in just a matter of weeks or months. Yeah.
What about contraindications? If
Contraindications.
somebody has a
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
pacemaker or
Oh, there's
a plate in their
yeah.
head?
Well, I don't know if I've had anybody yet at that degree. No, I mean, there's really no contraindications to this. Again, when it comes to any electrical implants like a cardiac pacemaker, remember, these are just sensors. They're not emitting any electricity into the brain or the body. They're just sensors. So yeah, there's really no contraindications to neurofeedback for, like I said, anyone within that age range of 5 to 6 years old and beyond. Yeah.
So, the reason I ask these questions is there's probably somebody, this is the first time they hear about it, even though
Mm-hmm.
maybe they just stumbled upon the classroom and they didn't know anything about me, but they researched neurofeedback, and here we are learning about it for the first time.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that people rule out, another thing that we've ruled out in the past is cost, and the cost of being on medication, the cost of the side effects of all these things versus the cost of doing this out of pocket in its nominal fee compared to, going to a doctor's office and getting that diagnosis
Yeah.
plus the medication plus all that other
Yeah.
stuff. How would you
Yeah.
compare them?
I mean, this is at the end of the day, this is much more cost effective than anything else I think you're gonna encounter, especially now. And like we discussed last month on the last podcast, now that we have these new home-based systems that have become more cost effective, and now we even have the ability to do a form of QEEG brain mapping from the home, so that takes care of the travel expense, the time to get to a clinic like mine that does QEEG brain mapping. The cost, I mean, it's almost not even a factor anymore. Yes, there still is a cost associated, but at the end of the day, something that can transform your life in a matter of months. First, what value do you put on that? That's what I like to change the word from cost to value.
Yeah.
How much do you value your health, more specifically
Absolutely.
your brain health or your emotional health?
Absolutely.
That's where you really got to dig deep and say, all right, where can I get the resources? Whether it be, and I offer a variety of different monthly pay plan options for clients. Sometimes they'll reach out to family, or they'll dive into their FSA or HSA. That's reimbursable through that. So it's really comes down to is how much value do you put on this thing between your ears, which is, in my opinion, the most important part of our body.
That's right. That's right. So, we're at the end. This has gone so fast, we're almost at the end of the class today. What kind of hope can you leave us all with when they've been told that there is no hope? They're feeling that we're living in a world that is hopeless. There's so much evil in the world, or, you're not going to get over this. You have to take that pill if you want to get over PTSD or ADHD or whatever. What kind of hope can you offer for the people and the future of neurofeedback?
Yeah, there's plenty of hope, and you start to explore things beyond the traditional. Okay. Again, I mentioned the book by Bessel van der Kolk, The Body Keeps the Score, available on Amazon or anywhere you buy books. It's also in audio fashion. That's how I got through the book many years ago when it first came out. Tune into YouTube. Of course, I've mentioned Dr. Joe Dispenza many times on our podcast. Start tuning into these sorts of things. tune into our podcast. We've been doing this for how long now?
Quite some
Start
time.
changing what you're tuning into. Start learning some new things about your brain, about your body. Just keep it basic. Great thing about AI now, again, yes, anything has a downfall with technology, but AI makes it streamlined so you can start to learn more of this and process it maybe quicker. But reach out for help, whether it be
Yeah.
Lily, myself. Again,
Yeah.
I have 45 minutes for anyone that tunes into your podcast, our podcast together. 45 minutes. Let's
Yeah.
just go on a Zoom call, a phone call. Let's discuss what your life is, where you've been, where you're at, and look at the next best steps and make it as cost effective as possible for you, one step at a time. That's all we can do.
I love it. I love the hope that you bring, especially, when there's so much shame associated with brain injuries or mental
Mm-hmm.
disorders or anything like that, that we should eliminate that. This is a part that needs rewiring, like a
Yeah.
light bulb or an electrical switch. And it's as simple as that. And I love the fact that you make it so affordable and approachable, like, like doable.
Yeah.
So we have everything to gain by reaching out and scheduling this 45-minute consultation. We also have NeuroFeedback 2.0 that we did, rewiring the brain with Dr. John Silva, with NeuroFeedback with Dr. John Silva 2.0, and we're giving that away free for you to watch as well. So you'll have to reach out to me for that one. So thank you, Dr. Silva, for everything that you do to help us all have a clear mind and a brighter future. So thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you for tuning in.
And please remember, we'll be right here waiting for you worldwide at whenyouneedafriend.com. This is Lily McDermott and Dr. John Silva, wishing you love, peace, joy, and unexpected abundance. Make it the best day ever. Good job. Good job.
The opinions and advice expressed on the Lillian McDermott radio show are intended for the individual callers and guests on the program and are presented to our wider audience solely for general educational purposes. Please act responsibly and consult personally with your own medical, psychological, or nutritional expert before taking any steps to improve your life.